Well, good afternoon, everyone. I have to say, I'm very excited to be here today with WCCN. I believe one of the world's, if not the world's oldest social impact fund. And I'm here with Will and Fiorella, and we're going to talk a lot about the work that you guys do and the work that you may be doing in the future. And I'm also very excited to talk about our collaboration. So, Will, maybe you could start us off just by describing for our listeners what is WCCN, what is your mission, and how do you go about executing on it?
Yeah, happy to. Well, thanks for having us on, Rob. It's great to be able to tell our story and nice to see you again. Um, uh, so WCCN today stands for Working Capital for Community Needs, but we go by our acronym. We've been working in Latin America since 1984, and there's a few unique things about WCCN. So we are a retail investment fund, which means basically anybody in the US can invest and make a loan to WCCN. So really democratizing the impact investing space, which is cool. And our fund started in 1991, so that does make us one of the oldest funds in the world. We're an evergreen fund, so we're always raising capital for our project. And so we're also a 501c3, which is important to mention. So we're a nonprofit. We could take donations and grants, recoverable grants. But our primary way of sustaining our mission is through loans. So taking loans from investors, lenders in the US, and then on lending that to credit unions, financial cooperatives, ag cooperatives, and other foundations that are working in the microfinance space, with a particular emphasis on Central America, including Nicaragua, which is where we got our start back in 1984, but also in the Andean region of South America. So we're taking that capital and pooling it together with our own and making loans that are bigger, anywhere from $500,000 to $1 million to these institutions on the ground in Central America, and they are doing the micro lending themselves. So they're breaking this up into an average loan size of about $1,500 and lending it to people who don't normally have access to credit otherwise, and helping them start businesses. And our partners will provide non-financial services like financial education would probably be the biggest one. So teaching entrepreneurship classes and teaching people about savings and how to manage their credit and make timely payments. But also offering sometimes things like healthcare and other kinds of education, reforestation, offering other kinds of loan products like water and sanitation, solar lending, and other things. So it's great work. We've got about 25 partners today, and our fund is about $15 million in size.
Fantastic. And you said you've been around from since 1991, but the roots of the firm you also said go back to 1984.
That's
And
right.
what's that all about?
Yeah.
In,
Uh, well, going back even like further, is that Wisconsin and Nicaragua were sister states. So and that's part of the JFK program called of the Americas, where they are twinning American states with Central American and South American countries. And it was sort of a soft power move. So, fostering these relationships in the hopes that these countries wouldn't become communist countries. And so Wisconsin and Nicaragua had been twins since the 1960s, and there had been a lot of exchanges between municipalities like sister cities, if you've seen those programs before, but also Rotary groups and parishes that had exchanges with other parishes there. So there had been a lot of people from Wisconsin that had gone to Nicaragua and Nicaraguans that had come up to Wisconsin. And in 1984, the Sandinista revolution had already taken place in like 79 or 80. And it wasn't well known in the United States that Reagan had been funding the Contras, providing arms to the Somoza regime to try to take back over Nicaragua. but people that were involved with WCCN started getting phone calls that were involved in the sister city relationship had started to get phone calls from people down there saying, "Hey, did you know that the U.S. government is sending grenades and guns and other things to the border, and and they're trying to take the country back over, and it's not good, and a lot of people are dying, and they're brutal tactics, etc." So the people in Wisconsin mostly wanted to know more about that situation and understand it. So they created WCCN, which back then stood for the Wisconsin Coordinating Council on Nicaragua. And the organization was really about sort of finding out what is the U.S. government's involvement, and then telling people at these parishes and municipality groups, and writing to senators and legislators, because even like at the federal level, like the U.S. senators and congressmen didn't necessarily know about this program that was happening with Reagan. So uh, that was sort of the first step, was like making people aware of the situation, and then the second step became providing relief to anybody who was affected by the war, no matter what side they were on. So food and medicine and bandages and things like that, but also agricultural supplies, seeds, tools, and then people from WCCN, volunteers for the organization, because it was all volunteer at that point, were flying down to Honduras, backpacking into Nicaragua, and helping farmers bring in their crops, helping teach kids, helping manage people, and just try to keep people going during the war. So those efforts went on for about 6 years until there was an election in 1991, and the U.S. backed candidate won the election, and the Sandinistas said that fine, that was a fair election, and we'll step aside if that's what the people want. So that kind of ended the war relief efforts, and we started to think about what does the country need now, and what it needed to do was to rebuild. So rebuild businesses and houses, and water mains and all of these things. So that's the birth of the fund, was a couple of our board members putting in $60,000 total into an NGO in Nicaragua, and saying, if you can pay us back, that would be great. And they did after a few years, and so those people told their friends and said, "Hey, look, we could start a loan fund," but they didn't even call it a loan fund or know what that really meant. It was innovative, and they just said, "We are lending money, and you should lend money too, and we can help rebuild this country." And so WCCN had an office in Nicaragua back then, and was basically responsible for helping the earliest microfinance institutions on the ground start. So to teach them how to start lending, and help them with governance and other issues, and to finance them, and look for other funders as well. So in that sense, like, WCCN was partly responsible for helping to start the microfinance sector in Nicaragua. And then at some point, it just didn't make sense to have all of our eggs in one basket, and so the decision was made to expand to Guatemala and El Salvador and Honduras, and then today we're in 10 countries across Latin America.
That is a fantastic story, Will. Thank you. And I think it's fair to say a unique one for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah. um, could we roll forward to today and tell us a little bit more in detail, if you would, about some of the kinds of support that ultimately the lenders provide to the borrowers in situ locally, and then how you guys get involved in making sure that those loans stay focused on the mission that you guys have provided or want to provide.
Yeah, well, it's a good question. You know, Taking the second part of that question first, really contractually, we do um, legal agreements in country with local lawyers in Spanish, in their language, and it's explicitly laid out, like, this has to be used for microfinance. It can't be used for other things, and we put in other stipulations about, like, loan size and things like that. So we have like that sort of control, I guess, at the onset. Uh, in terms of our mission, it's really important to us as an organization that we are in places where there's just not access to credit, or there's little access to credit. So, if you go to a place like Guatemala City or Tegucigalpa, like there's quite a few options in the urban areas, and there's very large tier one microfinance institutions that are able to offer credit in those places. But it's still we're still striving to like get to that last mile, like looking at um, anecdotally, like a city of 20,000 people that has a microfinance institution that then has uh, office branches in smaller towns, or motorcycle fleets that go to those smaller towns. So the main town may be a little bit bigger, but they're getting out into villages of 50 people, 100 people, where there just wouldn't be the economies of scale to start a credit union. And that's really our jam. Like that's our mission, is giving access to credit. So I think that there's definitely a sense, like in microfinance, that the industry's matured and you always want to do more. So it's not just credit; it can't only be credit. But I think it's really important. And in our case, the state, a lot of it is just about credit and giving that first access to credit. And then with the non-financial services, um, that's another place that is important. We don't tell them what to do, but we just say it is important that you offer some sort of non-financial service or another. I think most of them naturally lend to financial education and entrepreneurship and business training, because it provides sort of an assurance that, or like a better chance that the micro borrower is going to pay off the loan if they have gotten some business training and support, and they feel like they know what they're doing and they know how to market their product or their service. So we see that across the board as sort of the most commonly offered non-financial service. But we do have great partners like Promo Hair, which is all across Latin America, uh, and in Mi Credito, which is more focused in Nicaragua and Honduras now, that are offering healthcare and other types of education and other loan products.
That is, on some levels, very straightforward. On the other hand, you're an organization in Wisconsin dealing with organizations in Central America and other parts of the globe, and you're relying on those organizations to actually lend to the people who want the capital. And that can become really complex really fast. Organizationally, how do you guys maintain that mission, and how do you guys think about executing consistently over the years? Because clearly you have.
Yeah. Well, we are here in Madison, Wisconsin. At least some of us are. But Fiorella, for instance, is in Costa Rica. Our employee Kayla is in Nicaragua. Lorena is in El Salvador. We have other people that work more on a consultant basis, like in Guatemala, Colombia, and Ecuador. So we've always, as we've expanded, we try to find people who have worked in the industry before that are on the ground, so that in theory, if there are issues or if we're needing to do a due diligence in person, which we do quite often, that our sort of representative could be there in an hour or two. Like they're very close by, and they understand the local context. And I think a lot of it comes down to the due diligence process. Um, Not every fund does an in-person due diligence, especially post-pandemic. A lot of it has become a Zoom call, where you sort of go through things and meet the managers. But we have continued to do the in-person due diligence, and it's actually valuable to our partners. They appreciate that we do that, because we're making that sort of extra effort and taking the expense to travel to that really remote rural region of Guatemala or Nicaragua, and they're honored to have us there. But you just find that in person you see things that you just wouldn't otherwise. And so, I mean, we are doing an intense analysis where we're part of this is like we're asking for 10 client files, or we might even go into the file cabinet and pull them randomly ourselves. And we look through those files, all of the documentation, to make sure everything is there, that the interest rate matches the receipts for the payments that these people have made. And we will take those files then physically out into the field and meet the end borrowers and say, is this right? Like, is this your signature? What interest rate do you think you're paying? What is the amount that you have with them? How long have you worked with them? How do they treat you? And we not only do that for their sort of star clients, with of course they want to show you, but we actually ask to meet clients that are behind on their payments as well. And those are always really interesting conversations. And so we ask the loan officer to step aside. We just want to have a one-on-one conversation with this person about how did you get behind in your payments, what's going on, and how is this institution treating you? You know, what was your interest rate? Did you understand? Are you over indebted? Is that an issue? Because that's like a global concern in microfinance is over indebtedness. So we really kick the tires, so to speak, when we go down, and that's really the way that we ensure that it's working. But I'd say that we really rely on long-term relationships. So that's with our supporters, you know, our donors and investors. Most of them have been with us a really long time, but it's also on the ground in Latin America is establishing long-term relationships. So we're not interested in doing a one and done deal. We want to work with people that we can know for, you know, 10, 15, 20 years. And when we go, you know, we're hugging, we're friends, like we know them really well. We know their kids, they know our kids, and we can trust them. So I think that we're very relational, and that's different definitely from other funds that I've seen. You know, everybody has their own way of doing it, but as a small fund, it's just really important to us that we know them very well.
That is uh, incredibly dedicated to mission, I would say. And you know, if you think about ultimately the borrower is someone who might be getting $1,500, $2,000 in a loan, for you to have that level of commitment to the process, I think just speaks enormously to the commitment that you have in the space. And it reminds me of you know, conversations I've had with my friend Clara Miller, who's most known for, you know, running the Heron Foundation, but before that ran the nonprofit finance fund in New York. And she had the same view of the world, which is, hey, if I'm going to lend you money, I'm going to understand what you do, and the only way for me to understand what you do is to go see you, you know, and shake your hand. And I think that unfortunately, a lot of that old school lending doesn't exist anymore because everything is, you know, syndicated out. But there really is no better way to understand, you know, the power of your mission and the credit worthiness of your borrower than doing exactly what you guys do. It's just
Yeah.
fantastic. So, could we spend a little bit of time talking about, uh, first of all, the way you guys think about collecting information about your borrowers and the impact that you're generating. And then I want to get into the very successful collaboration that we had together, and you know, really focus on, you know, why a 40-year-old organization would even bother thinking about having uh, an organization like ours get involved with what you do.
Yeah. Well, great question. So, there's sort of like a few different ways that we collect information. So we really rely on our partners to get the information for us, most times. And the exception to that would be when we're traveling in the country, maybe doing this due diligence, or maybe we're taking a supporter there, or maybe we just decide to travel there on our own just to collect borrower stories. And that's you know, those are qualitative events mostly, I would say, but super valuable to us in terms of really getting a feel for the partner's work and the different kinds of support, and not having it connected to a due diligence visit can be actually really beneficial because there's no rush. We can take a lot of time, and you know, I've been out in the field, and I'll go to a borrower, and you know, they're not interested in talking to you, or they're really. I had a woman once tell me, could you just come back some other time? I'm really busy. Like I really need to sell
Well,
And she's selling these little packets of chili pepper, and she's like, I can't be bothered right now. And I said, of
I
course,
need to do what you loaned me money to
yeah,
do.
right. And then said, of course, yeah, we'll come back some
Yeah.
other time. So like sometimes you get talking to somebody, and it could be a minute or two, and then I've been in these visits where we plan on spending 5 minutes, and much to the chagrin of our photographer, I'll be there for an hour and a half, just like talking about this person's life and telling them about my life, and um and thinking about like the various ways in which we can help them, or we do help them. So that's like the time when we have that sort of direct person, us with the end borrower contact. We do supporter trips as well, usually the first week of February, so our investors, like donors or investors or prospective ones, can come along and actually meet the borrowers themselves and our partners and do some tourist things in the country. So that's another time that we have when we can really experience the culture and understand the context in which we're lending. So I would say you probably do 40, 50 in borrower stories a year where we have those, which is a nice subsection. And we go to different countries to meet them to really understand uh, the help that they need. But other than that, then we're relying on the partners. So our social impact survey, traditionally we're doing once a year. We try to wait until they've gone through their audit, their financial audit, because that's a heavy lift for everybody, including us. And so we don't want to really bother them during that time. And then also we can then use their audited financials to sort of support the social impact metrics. So typically we're getting this information in May, June, and then doing a lot of follow-up questions with them, which is sort of a time when we can offer some technical assistance in terms of like, we saw you filled it out this way last year, and it's a wild sort of shift to this year. What's going on there? And let's sort of unpack that and like talk about it, and talk about what WCCN wants to understand and see, but also what some of these other funds would be interested in the future, to make sure that they understand that. So we're sort of collating that data into our impact report then, which would be released in August or September. Um, we're looking as sort of a consequence of our interaction with Impact Evaluation Lab at actually asking for information more often, because we are asking for financial information every quarter. So there are some social impact statistics embedded in that financial information, but we're thinking maybe we can get these things more often, and use them in sort of our investment decisions more often. So that's part of our work with you all. But when it comes down to like who's collecting that data, it's typically the loan officer. So all of these microfinance institutions, probably their most common employee, or the most that they have, are these loan officers that go out into the street and are working with their current borrowers and past borrowers and then prospective borrowers to understand what their needs are, evaluate their capacity to pay, and then suggest a loan that could be helpful to them to maintain or grow their businesses. And so that is the person who collects the information at sort of the onset, and then every time they're making an investment decision is updating the profile that they have. And it has gotten better in the last few years with technology. So we see most of our investment officers, which work for our partners, are carrying iPads or some kind of tablet, and able to take pictures of the person and their assets, their business, and enter data like in the moment, where in the past this was all done on a paper sheet, with a pen and paper.
Right.
So investment that helps them actually make investment decisions more quickly, but it can also help them collect other kinds of social impact information. And that's sort of that's becomes the very important relationship is between the loan officer and the end borrower, and that's sort of where the opportunity is to get more information on social impact. And but there are some um, obstacles, which is mostly the loan officer wants to make loans, and they don't want to spend a lot of time collecting social impact data. So um, that's sort of the friction in where we're at and where we're going to be working over the next few years in terms of working with our partners and their loan officers to collect better information and the information that would be useful to WCCN, but other funds as well.
That is really such an important part of what you guys do. And we having worked with you, we're definitely looking forward to seeing how that evolves. I wanted to take a step back for a minute and Fiorella ask you, having gone through the engagement with us, having gone through the assessment, and having understood what our perspective was on what you were doing after sharing your perspective on what you were doing, hoping you could talk a little bit about just generally the process of working with the Impact Evaluation Lab. And then I know there was a moment when you guys said, "Huh, they're pointing out something that maybe we could do better." If you could just walk us through, like, what was your own personal view there, and then maybe how did you convince everybody at WCCN that there was something that might best be changed? That would be really helpful, I think, for a lot of our listeners.
Thank you, Rob. It's really interesting. It's always helpful to have a third party assessment and to have someone outside the organization to point at things that we were doing great and that were useful for us, but also highlighting the things that we may want to improve in the process of the impact measurement and management within WCCN. So, with the assessment that we have with Impact Evaluation Lab, we could see those things that were really valuable for us. For example, our mission, and we got a really good scoring on our mission authenticity, which is really important for us because we are doing this work for over 4 years because of the mission and because of we believe that there are people needing capital, needing non-financial services in Latin America. So there certainly are a lot of challenges. So having validated our mission, the authenticity that we put into this effort is really helpful and really motivate us to keep doing this work because it is really working, and we've seen firsthand in these field visits and these study trips that we do with our partners and with the end borrowers. We've seen firsthand that even with a loan of $100, people put that into work and they start to work themselves out of poverty. So that works. But with the things that you highlighted that needed to improve was how to translate that impact that we are seeing in the field into metrics and into insights for the broader field, and more investors that are not able to go and visit for example Nicaragua or go to Ecuador and visit our own borrowers. So that's where we really, well, I felt that where once you highlighted these points, for example our investor contribution or things in our impact management and measurement process about the depth of impact, not only the reach of impact, that was really important because we took that assessment like line by line, and we created a plan for us to improve those things. So we go all over our impact management and measurement process because we try to incorporate impact along the investment cycle. So we really took it seriously, and we were line by line, and we were able to create some really good things for us in terms of how we are communicating the depth of our impact in Latin America. So we created a scorecard to measure not only the financial return, but also the impact that our partners are having. So we were able to put it in, like visually, and see, okay, these are the things that we want to work with our partners. Here we are okay. Have those things like in written, it's really helpful because of course organization takes the mission and the impact very seriously, but in the technical side of it you need to have a framework. We since 2020 we've been working and we've been aligning the impact framework that we have with globally recognized frameworks such as the iris plus and the sdgs, but going one step beyond that and really see the impact more than a metric and say that okay, we are fulfilling our mission, we are fulfilling our theory of change, which is trying to support and improve the lives of the people in Latin America. So how do you show that? How do you show that you are improving the lives of the people? So that's where you really help us with this assessment. We're really glad to working with you and also to validate that we have authenticity within our mission, and also that we are a sustainable model, because since 1991 we have a 100% repayment record to our investors, both principal and the interests as well.
Wow, never had a default. That's quite a track record in 40 years. Really incredible. Fiorella, could you maybe take a minute and explore what you just said, which is how are some of the ways that you've started to demonstrate the change that you're able to affect and the support that you're able to give the end borrowers in the communities that you're serving?
Okay. Yes. The first part is that we are fulfilling a demand for credit in Latin America. So when we are working with our partners, they need funds in order to lend these funds to the people that need it the most. So we wanted to assess if we are adding value to our partners. We knew it because of our long-term relationships, but how can you demonstrate that with data, right? So we created an attribution and additionality assessment based on what Impact Evaluation Lab recommended us. So we were able to work with our partners and really see where we are adding value to them. Actually, in this last survey that we made, 94% of them told us that our mission, that our work with them are really valuable and they are changing the things, like that we are adding value to them and they are better with us than without us. And the other side of it is maintaining a close relationship with our partners, but go and visit our end borrowers as well. So when we go to these study trips, we ask our borrowers if they are able to in, increase their income, or if they were able to hire new people. So we structured the survey that we are asking them, the questions that we are asking them in the field, in order to really evaluate the depth of impact, because we want to see if they are able to increase their income, and with this income increase they are able to spend more in medicine, spend more in food. So those changes within the lives of our end borrowers, we structure the surveys better in order to capture that. And the other side of it is with this scorecard that we created, where we measured the impact uh, in terms of job creation, in terms of income increase, in terms of borrowers with access to credit. We could measure our partners, so to have like a benchmark of where we are
Mm,
and then try to improve with them. So we have a baseline. So for this year, so we with this we are being able to set an action plan to see how can we improve our partners' score, internal score, and
mhm,
how we can use technical assistance for that. So if I have to put that in one phrase, it would be like we are more structured, and so we have better tools and we can use the data for decision making, because it's not that we didn't have the impact before, it's now we are having the tools to measure that in a more international recognized
mm.
way.
That's fantastic, and I want to say we're just thrilled we were able to help.
Yeah, that was really really helpful, because it's different when you are outside of the organization, because you enter with a non-biased a non-attached or engagement, so you are just telling objectively the things that we needed to improve and the things that we were doing right, that were part of our differentiators. So it's really cool, and of course you went with us all over the way. It wasn't like we were alone in this process.
That's uh, that's exactly how we like to see ourselves as a partner. So thank you, Fiorella. Really appreciate you saying that. So, Fiorella, thank you. That's really gratifying for us to hear that we were able to assist you. I know that there are some very specific and some very strategic ways that you were able to take, the feedback that you got from our assessment and then deploy that in ways that is changing your outlook for the long term. Could you maybe talk about that and help the listeners understand it, what that really means for you guys as an organization?
Yeah. So it's been such an interesting process with coming up with a better way to ask questions, and learning about a few different frameworks we could use to ask questions of our partners. And so we already in the sort of first generation have gotten better information, and we found that there was some information that they had that we weren't asking the right way, or we did just weren't asking at all. So for this year, for this impact report that'll come out for 2024, there's going to be better info. And I think the really exciting thing in the long term, though, is our ability to use this impact information when we're making investment decisions.
Will, thank you. I also know that there was, in addition to sort of the strategic help that we were able to give you when it comes to metrics and measurement, I know that there was also an important connection that you guys made through the evaluation work that we did that allowed you to see through the social impact that you're having to the financial returns that you're having. And maybe you could take a minute and explain that to us.
So essentially, through this new impact scorecard that we have, where we're getting 20 plus metrics, that's creating an impact score. So we already have the financial score, and now we can combine the impact score into one holistic score for the organization. So we've done that for the first time. There's a little tweaking that needs to happen as we move forward. But what we were basically able to do was throw all of our 25 partners on a graph, which is showing financial impact versus social impact, and we could see where all these different partners were winding up. And so that was the first time we've ever been able to do that. And we realized immediately after seeing this graph and kind of high-fiving each other, oh, we have to use this. It's not just that it looks cool, but we actually need to use this when we're taking a deal to our program related investment committee. We need to present this, and we need to take the new partner or the current partner with their updated score and show where do they fall relative to all of these other partners that we have. And besides having Fiorella on staff, we actually recently hired a woman with a master's degree. She recently graduated from UW Madison, and she's studied GIS and mapping. So she's going to be able to help us with this um, map process. And we realize there's so much we can do with this information in terms of comparing large institutions to small institutions, and by country and within the countries, who's doing a better or worse job. And it's not about, punishing partners that aren't doing a good job, but it's about talking to them, showing them this graph and saying, look, like this is where you are, and we need you to go move up into this quadrant, and we're willing to help you. In fact, it's such a great tool for us to maybe go out and get money for technical assistance too, to say like, look, here's all of these partners in this specific country, and they're really falling behind with their non-financial services or their social impact. And it doesn't have to be that way. We could help them. We could get them the money and the training and whatever. And if they're willing, like do the work to move them up, to be with these better partners. And to me, that's like a long-term thing. Totally didn't see that coming out of the impact evaluation lab audit when we agreed to it. I thought it was going to be more like, how are we doing? And, here's a few metrics to improve. I didn't really see us like changing our business model or like our decision-making process. So that was a really cool thing to come out of this. And um, our board is super excited. We've shared this with a couple investors and potential investors, and they're really excited about it. And maybe something that we can present someday to other funds that they could be doing too.
That's really fantastic. Thank you, Will, for taking the time to tell us all about that. I want to take a step back for a second and just ask you a question around the sort of the state of impact in the world today. I think in the United States, goes without saying, there's a lot of pushback on, mission-oriented financial institutions, mission-oriented investment firms. You guys, of course, are based in the United States, but you've also got a mandate that brings you, uh, further south. How do you see what's going on in the United States affecting your mission, if at all? And how do you maybe, from a, a distant perspective, see that evolving?
Yeah, I mean that's what everybody's talking about, right? So as we've had calls with potential investors and funders, or we've renewals coming up with some of our organizational investors, that's been the question. One, do you have any money from USAID, DFC that you have to
Mm-hmm.
repay?
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't. WCCN hasn't taken government money before, so we in fact, the sort of the genesis of the organization was trying to tell people in the U.S. what the American government was doing, that was not helpful in Nicaragua back in '84. So I think that's just been part of the ethos of the organization of just being independent, grassroots funded. But uh, we're trying to grow. So part of our strategic plan over the next 5 years is getting from $15 million to $25 million just to be more sustainable. I think in light of climate change and in the political and social conflict that's going to cause, we know that there's going to be disruptions and losses and things. So at 25 million, we can be pretty sustainable and take those losses. So as we've sort of explored the space, it's not only in the U.S. that this international support is drying up, but also in Europe, because there's been pressure on the European countries to pay for their own defense. So this is, NATO and the U.S. pushing the European countries to cover more of their own expenses. And so one of the first things they cut back on then is international aid. And while again we haven't taken money from those places before, we've been hearing like it's not just the U.S., it's drying up in other places, and it's going to take some time for that to filter down. to the sort of informal economy and the end borrowers that we serve. There's some counterintuitive things going on right now. So there was a real worry that with the immigration practices and things that remittances would dry up. But we've been hearing that remittances are actually up right now because people don't feel safe having their money in the U.S. in case they get kicked out. They just want to send it, to Central America ahead of time. So remittances are actually up right now, and there is less migration, and so there are a lot of people that have learned skills in the U.S. when they've come here, and now they're thinking about how do we employ these in Central America or South America. So using those skills and some of the capital that they've gained from doing migratory work in the past to start businesses. So our partners are actually having more demand right now. We were at a recent conference and we felt like we could fill $20 million of demand if we had 20 million extra dollars. So
Wow.
I think the demand is there, and like certainly on a global level, I've been hearing a lot in Africa, and in particular, I would say of just sort of the vacuum that this has created with the money from USAID, and also not just money, but like things like life saving drugs and medication and other things that just aren't getting there, food assistance that's just not getting there. That's having a really big effect on those populations. And I'm just a farm boy from Iowa County, Wisconsin, but I've been thinking about historically about aid, and trying to step back and think about like how were societies before aid happened, and when did aid really come into being. And traditionally I think that if you look at human history, generally it's about business. Like these have been about trade and business relationships. You can say exploitation as well, obviously slavery and exploitation of resources and stuff. But if you look at like the Greeks, let's say, like what were they doing? They were sailing to Egypt, they're sailing to Phoenicia, to Italy, which wasn't Italy obviously, but part of the Greek Empire, or these city states, and just doing trade, getting to know each other. There was wars, there was whatever, but there wasn't an agency that said, well, we're going to give $10 million to Lebanon. So this whole idea of international aid and development is a relatively new idea. And while I really am not in favor of the way that this all went down, and things happen so quickly, and there's clawbacks and all of these things going on, which are really unfair. It is a moment for us to all step back and say, is this working? We can evaluate it. Is it working? Is it not? And like, what changes do we need to make this to really help people genuinely work out of poverty, and what's working and what's not. So I've been taking that view of it, and but it's definitely an interesting time as we hear how the dominoes are sort of falling as layoffs are happening and just aid's not getting where it used to go.
Thank you. Well, that's an extremely thoughtful answer to a pretty complex question, so appreciate that very much. Um, that's that's the sort of amount of time we've got right now. I do want to, just to give you a heads up, get into one round of questions that I always ask, which is just sort of a speed round of fun questions. You didn't get these beforehand, but I think it's always fun to do that. So I'm going to wrap up there, and then I also want to re-record the introduction because I think some of the things that you said, both of you along the way, really belong in the introduction. So I'll do that again.
Great.
So Will, thank you. That was a really thoughtful explanation and answer to a pretty challenging question. I want to pivot now into maybe some more fun. Just ask you both a few questions that you didn't expect. The first of them is what I like to call my food questions, which is, what is one food that you would order out but you would never cook at home?
Fiorella.
Mine I don't know if it's easy to cook, but I love lasagna, and I haven't cooked that in my house because it's really complex for me. So I always ask my mom to cook lasagna for me.
Excellent. How
Uh,
about
I'm
you,
gonna
Will?
I'm gonna go with sushi. So I tried to make sushi once at home, and it came out like the size of my fist, the rolls. So, I just realized that I didn't have the talent or the experience to do that. So I'll order out sushi.
I will say that is by far the most common answer.
Yeah,
Although I have not interviewed anyone in Japan yet, so
yeah.
we'll see. What is the one food that you really do like to cook at home?
We make my wife and I had the opportunity to travel to India in 2010 after my grad degree, and we came home with a shoebox full of spices in an Indian cookbook. And I think we've only ever made one recipe out of it, which is the traditional chicken curry, and we make it probably at least once a week. Our kids love it, and it is more complex, and it's like a what's cool about it is it's like a process you go through. So putting the spices and oil to kind of like make the oil taste like the spice, and then adding the onion and garlic and ginger. So it's kind of a methodical thing you go through over an hour or so, and then you let it simmer. And it's a family favorite, so that's nice that everybody eats it.
How about you, Fiorella?
For me, there's a really famous breakfast in Costa Rica. It's called gallo pinto. It's like rice and beans with eggs and toast. So my husband and I cook that every Sunday. So it's going to be gallo pinto. You have to try it
Nice.
if you haven't.
Oh, I'm going to. I love we make burritos for breakfast, which I love. So I'm gonna try that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, it's something like that.
excellent. So what's your favorite musician?
Will?
You go. Right. Well, I can go. It's sort of I really like Bob Marley, and also really like Led Zeppelin. But I'm going to
Wow,
give you, oh,
that's pretty far apart.
yeah, I'll give you a more obscure artist though that I'd recommend to the viewers is Dorothy Ashby. And so Dorothy Ashby is a jazz harpist, and
Oh,
so taking an instrument you would never think about at jazz, and she's really wonderful. And I think I heard her on a compilation album, and then my wife gave me like her big set, and it's just wonderful music to work to. So you can put that on and like produce an impact report or whatever you're working on. It's just really settling music.
that's great.
For me, it's going to be Natalia Lafourcade and also Alicia Keys. I love their music.
Fantastic. Well, guys, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for your time today exploring the mission of WCCN. It goes without saying you guys are having a tremendous and important impact in the world, and I know you're looking to grow, and we wish you the best in achieving those ambitions as well as everything you've achieved so far.
Thanks, Rob.
Thanks.